how do you set something on fire and use it to cool something down?
Exactly.
Essentially, it's what you're doing. First of all, octane doesn't make power; it just suppresses detonation. Right. So a lot of people think, oh, if I go to higher octane or a super high octane, I'm going to make all this power, and that's not correct. A lot of people, they look at it and they say, well, it's awful expensive. But again, when you look at the overall package and how bad do you want to win? If you're going to win, you got to have
absolutely.
You got to have the best of the best.
Why? What is up with the vibrant colors of the fuel? For one, like the 93 is blood red. It almost looks like Kool-Aid. Like it looks appetizing, which is very dangerous. Don't drink your fuel. That's weird.
Let's see how you do under pressure. Yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Hey. Yeah. Ain't no errors, baby. It's a new era. I wake up early, feeling rich like I'm Kesha. I get to the paper, boy.
Welcome back to the #1 Drift Podcast on YouTube, presented by Enjuku Racing. My name is Dawson, and today we have
Ron Finney. I'm the tech director here for Renegade Race Fuels, and glad to be here today. Super exciting to be in the drift world.
Yeah, we're bringing in feels like a whole new company to drifting as far as fueling and oiling goes, because even now I get questions all the time at events. It's like, who's Renegade? I've never even...
Yeah, that's great, because we're third largest manufacturer of race fuel, but we've got a lot of areas. We're still a fairly new company, only about 25 years old, and there's a lot of areas of racing that we haven't had an opportunity to participate a lot in yet, drifting being one of them. It's a fairly new entry, 2 or 3 years into it for us, and a lot to learn on our side.
Wow, it's that short.
Yeah, it's been pretty short. We've been working with a couple of teams, I think, for about 2 to 3 years mainly.
Awesome.
So yeah, we're excited. A lot of opportunity, learning a lot on our side about your world and what we can do to make the performance even better.
Oh yeah, that's good to know. All right, well, of course, before we get into all of that, I know we're gonna go down a deep dive on chemical compounds and all sorts of stuff. So, but before, look below the video, make sure that subscribe button is not still red. If it is, go ahead and press that and hit the bell notification while you're at it so you never miss an episode. And on top of that, I did want to mention that for all you S13 guys out there, especially more specifically the hatch, the Type X taillights that everyone knows and loves for the S13s, they're too expensive, but luckily Enjuku, they just came out with those, so they're a lot more affordable. You can find them on Enjuku. Links are always in the description for that. And of course, other parts and stuff for like E46, E36, and a couple Toyota platforms. So, but yeah, we are here at Renegade, which a lot of you know because I run their HR93 and my RB25 350Z. So trying to get a little bit more info and insight on not necessarily who you guys are, because of course we want to cover that, but more of like compounds and like how fuel actually benefits you when it's not necessarily just pump gas and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's perfect. Those are the kinds of things we like to do. We like to do fuel seminars for our customers and distributors and racers around the country, so they better understand the fuel, because the better their performance, the better they're going to do, the more they're going to race, the more fuel we sell. So it's a full circle for us. So we love to do this kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, I'll just start it out pretty generic. I guess, why would you say race fuel and lubricants is important for motorsports just in general?
Well, I think it goes down to having quality and consistency in the product. We'll dive into the fuels a little bit here later, but the bottom line is you've got to have a good product, you've got to have a quality product, and it's got to be consistent if you're going to have good winning performance all the time. So that's where, unlike production fuel that you're going to get at a pump, when you get into race fuel manufacturing, it's very specific formulas. They're different from pump fuels because they're designed to give that performance and everything else that an engine needs in that environment, whether it's the heat, the RPM, whatever.
Right.
You've got to cover all those that regular pump gas isn't designed to do. So that's where I think a lot of people, they look at it and they say, well, it's awful expensive, but again, when you look at the overall package and how bad do you want to win? If you're going to win, you got to have the best of the best, and the race fuel certainly is one aspect of that.
Yeah, and especially just one of the key factors of, like, it'll drop your temperature like 10 degrees just by adding a good fuel mix into whatever setup you're running. High horsepower is where you're definitely going to want to cater to that. But I mean, that's a selling point alone to me. Especially on my platform, RBs are known. They're iron block. They're crates. Like, they're anchors, basically. They're heavy. As soon as you shut them off, if you don't let them sit for a minute and cool off, they'll just shoot right up 20 degrees. So for someone like me, I can truly appreciate the temperature change when it comes to stuff like that. But I guess to another place to start off from, you hear all the time octane, but I don't feel like a lot of people genuinely know what octane is, what it's used for, how it, if you just want to give the generic explanation.
Yeah, Dawson, that is a great topic to start with because it's one of the most misunderstood things that are out there. First of all, octane doesn't make power, it just suppresses detonation. Right. So a lot of people think, oh, if I go to higher octane or a super high octane, I'm going to make all this power, and that's not correct. So basically, when we look at octane, there's 3 ratings, and you see that little yellow sticker on the pumps out there. It says RM2. So that's the research octane, the motor octane, and divided by 2 gives you an average, and that average is called the pump octane. And that's what all the manufacturers, when you look, whether regardless whose fuel it is, that's what they're advertising is that pump number. So just briefly, the research number, octane's tested at a lab, and it's done with a machine that has it's a single cylinder calibrated test rig. Yeah. And it's kind of funny, people get a kick out of this. For the research number, the engine runs at 600 RPM and 13 degrees timing. Does that sound like what you ran last weekend?
No, not at all.
Exactly. So, but that'll give us the research number. And they use chemicals like heptane, which has a very poor octane number, and isooctane, which has a rating of about 100. That's the calibration chemicals that they benchmark against. So they'll do the research test, and then for the motor octane number, it's the same engine, has a variable cylinder on it, and they can vary timing. So now, hang on to your seat, we're going to spin this puppy up to 900 RPM, and we're going to start
breaking records, baby.
Oh, baby, you got to hang on there. That's why I tell folks all the time. I say, yeah, I know your car idles about that, but anyway. So we're going to spin this 900, but now we're going to start increasing the compression on the engine and throwing more timing at it. So it gives it more of a loaded number. So that's what the RM2 is. It's the research, then the motor number, and then we divide it by 2 to get an average.
Gotcha.
So when people start looking at those, well, which number do I need to look at? Both of them are important, and there's a reason for that. One is we always want to look at the motor octane to make sure we have enough. It's not indicative of a race engine, we get that, but it is the more stressed of the 2 numbers. So we want to make sure there's enough octane there to support whatever your base platform is. If you got the turbo on there, you're generating a little extra heat. Yep. Whether it's supercharged or it's normally aspirated, what the compression is, and all the factors in there. We want to make sure we have enough octane there. But we also want to look at that motor octane, because what can happen is, an example that I like to use all the time, is that companies will advertise products out there. Say, I've got a 110 is one I like to use a lot because it's easy to do the math.
Right.
So you take a blend A, let's say, has 120 on a research number and has a 100 on a motor octane. That's going to average 110.
Okay.
You take the same 110 number, but we have 112 on the research and 108 on the motor octane. That's going to average 110. Pretty easy to see, not even the same fuels by any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fuel A is going to be good, maybe 11 to 1, where fuel B would support almost 14 to 1.
Right.
So there's a big variation. That's why I like people to know a little bit more about it, look at both numbers, and of course they can always call the tech line and get help from us or any of the fuel experts out there to help them better understand that. But having a good feel for that both numbers are important. And as we talked about, and you mentioned earlier, cooling. I know it'll be one of the questions that somebody's going to ask us today.
Absolutely,
on the cooling of fuel, but having a tighter those numbers between research and motor, that also helps in the overall combustion, and which leads to good cooling effect.
Okay. Wow. So as far as is octane really measured true when it comes to pump gas? Because I feel like it's told that it's not always as true as it's said to be, or is that just?
No, I think that's a lot of urban legend a little bit. Yeah, the manufacturers, I mean the big companies, they do their due diligence on getting the testing done. But like any product, it can vary quite a bit. Just because they're creating an 87, that's the number that they've got to stand behind. But again, they could have different research number, different motor number. So the 87 you ran this fall might not be the 87 you run in the spring, because just like the example I gave you, it's an average.
Yeah.
So we can get there a couple of different ways, or multiple different ways.
So wild.
So it can vary a lot, and you hear guys, well, I run brand X and it runs really good, or I got this fuel from somewhere else and it didn't run as good. There could be some legitimacy to that, but again, in production and big manufacturing and in the automotive world, automotive engines today are designed to run, the base octane is really 85. And that's what Detroit sets out for. And everything else is, pretty much 86 minimum in the U.S., 87. So they've got a buffer there.
Yeah.
So again, they can play with that a little bit. And if they're a kind of an 87 that's not as good as the 87 was before, they're a company, they're in business, so they're looking at chemical prices and how can I meet that AKI number, the anti-knock index, and still be profitable. So
Right.
So there can be
They have
variation.
more regulations and stuff on them as far as that goes versus race gas and stuff.
They do with the EPA requirements.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've got to meet, and we've got the ethanol percentage that can be blended in, and the government's taken that from 10 to 15% here in the last few years, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. In the old days, it kind of was. Cars weren't compatible. Fuel system components weren't compatible with ethanol, and we had a lot of degradation and line leakage and seals and O-rings and injectors and things going bad. But today, everything being built is pretty much ethanol compatible. So, and there's some cooling benefits to ethanol. So it can definitely not necessarily be a bad thing. But again, depending on the percentage, and if that varies from blend to blend, tune's going to vary from blend to blend.
Okay. Well, I guess staying on the pump gas topic, if just since I run the 93 in my car, we'll just stick with that. What is the main differences as far as race HR93 and just regular pump gas? Like if you could break down chemical makeup or just performance benefits that are different.
Sure.
I'll let you take over.
Okay, not a problem. So again, kind of getting back to what we talked about a little bit ago with the manufacturers, they've got to hit an 87 number or a 93 number in your case. So they're going to shoot for that 93 pump octane number. Again, there's no regulation on what did the research have to be, what's the motor have to be. It's just they've got to be at that 93 average.
Yeah.
So they can get there however they get there. We, on the other hand, we're going to give you a performance grade 98.3, a race grade 93. So we're going to always make the same research number, always make the same motor number, because we're using the same chemicals every time. So that's the advantage of a performance or race grade fuel. You're going to get the same formula, the same combination every time, and that's what's going to give you the good, consistent performance, extra cooling effects, things of that nature.
That's crazy. It all comes back to that. Okay. Well, I guess, and then, so I still don't quite understand what actually breaks down the temperature difference. Like what, as far as, because it's octane, I guess, that is doing it, but like what parts is it? I don't even know how to ask the question.
I got you. I know where you're going with this. And it's a great topic. And one of the things I always like to throw out when I do the seminars is like, how do you set something on fire and use it to cool something down? Because essentially it's what you're doing. So here's an explanation that I like to use. So it's the latent heat of vaporization is the concept, the physics behind it. So an example I think everybody can attach to is, go in to take a shower.
Okay.
So we go into the bathroom, go in to take a shower, and we turn the water on. And of course, if you're like me, I like it hot. I'm cranking it way up. But we go in, turn the water on, and we take our clothes off and get ready to take our shower. Of course, there's some people that might want to shower with clothes on. It is a time saver,
Jeez, I don't know about that one.
Yeah,
a little odd.
Hey, I'm not here to judge, right?
Right.
All right. So, but anyway, we turn the water on, we get the bathroom warm. It's going to get hotter, feel the hot water running, got our clothes off. We get in the shower. We're not cold when we get in because it's room temperature. We get in, we take our shower, nice hot shower. I steam the whole place up. What do you notice as soon as you turn the water off and open the shower door?
It
gets cold.
Yeah.
Why are you cold all of a sudden? Because you went into the bathroom and weren't cold. You turned the hot water on for 10 minutes. The room is at least 10 to 15 degrees warmer than it was when you went in. But now you're cold.
Yeah.
It's latent heat of vaporization. So that's how our body cools itself, is from sweating. So all that water on you, as soon as you stop the flow of the water, that water starts evaporating. It's pulling heat out of your body.
That's a crazy example.
Yeah, so to change a liquid to a vapor, we have to add heat. And that's what's happening in your engine. When we change that gasoline, liquid fuel doesn't burn, only the vapors burn.
Yeah.
So as soon as we heat that fuel from compression and cylinder pressure, we heat that up, then we light it, we change it from a liquid to a vapor, it's going to absorb a bunch of heat. So we make the hot expanding gas to push the piston down, and we carry the heat out the exhaust.
Okay. Then, so as far as why wouldn't the pump gas treat that same concept? Then, if it's still the same thing, like what makes the race gas more beneficial and more efficient than the pump gas and doing the same thing?
Yep, that's a great question. It has to do with the chemicals that are used. So that's where the racing fuel, when you start to break down the cost of race fuel, it's because of the chemicals that we use versus what a refiner would use to make pump gas.
Just because it's more consistent?
It's more consistent. They're more expensive chemicals, but they generate more consistent results. And it's a combination of that chemistry that you put together. And that's why, we feel that we have a great product and have an advantage. Our tagline is we burn cooler, burn cleaner, and burn more consistent. And part of that is in that chemistry of getting that right to help the cooling of the process.
Okay. Wow, that's insane. Nobody ever, and you don't see that anywhere on the internet. Y'all should do content on stuff like that.
Yeah, we did back during COVID. We actually did some short video cast, and we've actually put we've had some of our seminars have been videoed and put up. But you're right. I mean, that's one of the things we love. We appreciate you guys, Circle Drift, having us out here today to talk to the folks and help the racers. Because again, we're a small company. Like I said, we're the third largest. We still look at ourselves as a small company. We're supporting the grassroots racers. Yeah, do we have professional racers? Absolutely. But that's not the heart of racing. The heart of racing is you, your friends, our buddies, and the guys out there beating it every weekend. And
I say it almost every episode.
Yeah,
Grassroots is where it's
taking, what money we have and hoping the kid doesn't eat a lot of lunch money this week, so we got extra money to go racing on the weekend. And, we've all been there. So
I'm sure the whole grassroots thing is a little bit more true to the point in like drag racing and stuff like that, because you don't get that big glorified professional racing. I feel like NASCAR gets, or now Formula Drift is getting. The eyeballs just aren't there as much, it seems.
Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, you take, we just came off the U.S. Nationals, so you've got 30, 40,000 people a day there in the big. But again, that's the professional racers. The sportsman guys were there too.
Yeah.
But everybody's coming to see the pros. And I think in every form of racing there's that. But if we look at, for every big chunk of professional racers, there's 10 times that of the guys that are doing it, trying to learn it, trying to go out and do it. They may not be out on the circuit because they can't afford to, or don't have the finances to do it. But I think their heart desire and wanting to do it is there, and that's one of the things that we value is trying to help them get the knowledge they need to get there. Yeah, we can do the fuel side. Other people can help with the performance side and parts, and JUCO with parts and everything. But your professionals have to come from somewhere, and they come from guys like you and me that are out here beating it every day, and some will make it and some won't. But
absolutely.
But they got to come from somewhere.
True. Big time. Well, I did just another oddball question on the 93 before we get too deep into stuff like that.
Sure.
Well, I go off topic way too quick, but what is up with the vibrant colors of the fuel? For one, the 93 is blood red. It almost looks like Kool-Aid. It looks appetizing, which is very dangerous. Don't drink your fuel. That's weird. But is it just color dye? Is that the whole point of it?
Yeah, manufacturers.
Distinguish?
Yeah, we use dyes to distinguish the products. There are product identifiers in there. So that's the main purpose of them. Whether it's pump gas from the OEM refiners or in the racing world, we're using fuel dyes to add as product identifiers.
Okay, cool. Because it's odd, but majority of the time when someone comes up and talks to me about it or asks about it or whatever, I'm like, dude, you got to look at the color of it. I don't know why it freaks me out, but just look at the color of it and smell it, because it's insane to me that it looks like Kool-Aid and it almost smells like it too. But what the scent of it and stuff too, is that all in every single fuel that y'all make, or is it just the smell, how it comes out?
That's the combination of the chemicals. There are some companies that put fuel scent in it, and we certainly we manufacture and sell fuel scent that people can add to their fuels, and we've all smelled them, from cotton candy to weed and everything else that's out there. But No, our fuels are pure chemical. We try to keep it as pure racing fuel as we can. So that's going to be just how the chemical combination.
Crazy. Because it smells like fruit. Like that, it smells fruity, which is why, especially when it burns. I have a really rich startup right now too. Every time I start my car, everyone's like, "What in the world is that?"
That's power,
That's
man.
Renegade, baby.
That's power. That's what they're smelling.
Oh, I love it. Okay, well, we don't have to dive too deep on that. I do want to talk about the scent boosters, though. You do get a lot of people that will say that scent boosters are bad for your fuel and, like, they can gum it up and stuff like that, I guess. Is that more a myth, or is that just for...
Yeah, again, I think that's a little
Pump
bit
gas
urban
stuff.
legend.
Okay.
If you're using too much of it, a lot of the fuel scent was developed for methanol. To go in and be used with methanol. Will it work with pump gas? Absolutely, but pump gas has a lot higher BTU. It's a lot denser fuel than methanol, so you're going to need more of it. So that's kind of the challenge. People are like, hey, they made the racetrack and they smelled the cotton candy or they smelled the cherry bomb or whatever, and I want that for mine. Well, you're not running methanol, you're running gas, so you pour a little in and, it's not enough. You pour more in and, I'm starting to smell it. Then they dump the whole bottle in. And that's where, at that point, injectors aren't real happy when you start putting chemicals like that in there. So to say that people have had some bad experiences, I would say that's probably valid, but it came from lack of knowledge and overuse of a product.
Right. Is there a proper chemical mix that you could use on, say, the 93 or the 85 or anything like that you would suggest, or you would just suggest probably just stay away from it?
No, it's good. It's kind of fun. When you mentioned that, I was laughing to myself. A friend of ours that rides Harleys with a group, and he came by the shop one day and he says, I want to get some of that. And it's like, okay. So he got a bottle and he didn't tell anybody. He puts it in, and so they're riding, and typical bikers, they stop about every hour for a break, 45 minutes, and someone's like, hey man, did you smell that back? I don't know if we came through a field of flowers or what. And he did this all day long to him, didn't tell him he had fuel scent in his exhaust of his Harley. So no, it's typically with gas, we'd say mix it 2 to 1. So on the bottle, it'll tell you how much you can use per gallon, typically for methanol. You would just double that, but don't triple it, just double it.
Yeah. Have some self-control there.
Yeah. We're racers. That's hard for us. I get it.
Right. Because I have a few of the bottles I like to just keep around and bring to events. I accidentally busted one, though, in my shop. I ran it because the drum, the 55-gallon drum, when it heats up a little bit, the top will pop. And I had one sitting on the top of it, and it popped off. And I didn't realize it, but it rolled under my car. So when I pulled my car out, it burst. My shop smelled like cherries for
a while.
3 months, dude. It was insane.
Yeah, it's pretty concentrated stuff. That's why it's in a little 4-ounce bottle.
Yeah. Oh, that's so wild. Okay, well, I guess we don't have to keep venturing down that road. But what are, I guess, all of the fuel compounds that you guys offer across the board?
Okay, yeah, if you're racing it, we make a fuel for it. So we make everything from the 93 that you guys are using in your ride, all the way up to 120 plus octane fuels for really high horsepower. We have methanol for any application. We've got ethanol-based fuels. We have a lot of oxygenated fuels, which are real popular with a lot of racers to help make more power with the same combination by carrying extra oxygen into the engine.
Right.
So everything from a leaded product line to an unleaded product line, and then ethanol and methanol fuels. So and we now have nitromethane that we're working with some blends with nitromethane in it.
Okay. Do you want to share anything on that real quick?
Yeah,
or as much as you can, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's we're doing two things with it. One, it's been used with alcohol methanol for years and as a power adder to blend in, and that's one of the things that we're working with. We'll be bringing out later. We were hoping to bring it out later this year. Honestly, we've just been so busy with production, and we make fuels for a lot of other companies. We do a lot of private label products.
Cool.
When you look at a lot of race fuels out there, there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's really only about 3 of us that are manufacturing the fuels from raw chemicals. So everything else are, we're probably supplying base products or something for other companies to do that. So we've been real busy. We were hoping to bring it out by fourth quarter. Maybe we'll launch by PRI. But we're doing that with the methanol. And then what's really exciting is we've done some testing already with ethanol, E85s, with nitro based, and some really exciting results on it. And
That's
And
awesome.
testing's good and bad. When you start testing and it's successful, then everybody wants it.
Right.
So we've got engine builders really, hey, we tested this 2 months ago. When are we going to get it?
Yep.
So yeah, unfortunately for our viewers, I don't have a production date yet of when those will be available, but I'm guessing probably by next season there'll be some new options for them out there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm stoked to see that. Let me know when y'all guys do and announce it too. So
Yeah, great.
we can get a little bit more eyeballs on it. But I guess what would you say is the most common fuel used across all motorsports that you guys offer?
That would be the 110.
The 110?
Yeah, it's kind of the industry staple. It's been around, for years and years and years by every company. So 110 is our highest volume mover. And it serves a lot, when you look at a lot of the racing from the drift stuff that you guys do, whether it's, you take your car on 93 works, throw more turbo to it, throw a little more boost at it, you're going to need to get the octane up. So everybody just kind of migrates into that 110, and it'll support fairly good compression up into the 12 and a half to 1 range. So all your old big block muscle cars, everything, it's just kind of the sweet spot of the industry. Certainly, the high-end guys need way more than that, but that's why the 110, I think, is so popular across all avenues, motorcycles, where they're beefing them up in the compression. It's just a nice sweet spot that seems like everybody's settled into.
In what scenarios would you necessarily need to go higher than 110 for, I guess, drifting? And so we'll start there.
Yeah, I think it's a great application there. So when you start, with putting a turbo on the car, one of the things, that's where your ethanols and methanols have gotten real popular because of the extra cooling effect they provide because they're more oxygenated than what non-oxygenated race fuel is.
Is this just any turbo car or like an NA motor that has been turboed?
Any turbo car is going to benefit from going to an alcohol-based fuel as far as cooling. Now, if they don't need it, if the intercooler, because you got turbo, intercooled, and non-intercooled classes, and so if it's non-intercooled, they need the cooling effect for sure. If it's intercooled,
wild.
if it's intercooled and they can build enough intercooler, they don't necessarily need to go to the expense of alcohol or the oxygenated type fuels. They can stay on a lesser fuel. But the other part of that is the boost. I mean, you're building more cylinder pressure. So when you start to build more cylinder pressure, whether it's NA and you're just increasing, cutting the head down and putting a bigger piston in, or whether you're putting boost on it, you're up in the cylinder pressure. So that's where you need to increase the octane. We always say you only need as much octane as you need to support the compression or the cylinder pressure. Having too much can hurt. It's not going to hurt the engine. It's not going to benefit you. So I like, when we talk to racers a lot of time, I tell folks that I kind of like, and probably in the drifting world, it's a little like a circle track world where I always tell them, I said, there's this scenario where you're running third and, first and second's battling, and you see an opportunity while they're fighting, I'm going to slip around them. So they get down to where you've got, the white flag lap. Suddenly the dash seems to fade. The oil pressure gauge fades. The water temperature gauge, is kind of getting faded. And then by the final lap, there isn't a dash in the car. I mean, we're going for it. There's no tack. Only thing we see is we won on the podium and
just praying.
we want the stripe and hope it holds up. So from those aspects, we know we're going to run the engine harder. We're going to push it hotter. We want, maybe a point or two extra octane. So if it's a 110 car, 112 might be a better choice for that to give you a little protection.
Okay.
What you don't want to do is go to a 116 or a 120 because that fuel's designed for a lot more heat and a lot more cylinder pressure than you're making. Will it work? Yeah, but you're not going to combust it all because you're not making the heat to vaporize the fuel.
Yeah.
So it's part of that fuel is going to go right back out the exhaust, and actually you'll see the power drop off.
That's crazy. Wow. Sorry, that was a lot. that's a lot of brain power for that. Okay, then I guess as far as like the science of all of these fuels mixed together and just the compound of it and how it's made up, why does Renegade itself stand out? Not just necessarily to pump gas, obviously. We can just scratch the pump gas thing. That's definitely stands out. But to its competitors, because I know you say you but you manufacture for other companies as well too. So even for those companies, how does Renegade stand out?
Sure. Well, I think it's our formulations. It comes from our founder, Toby Baptiste. He created the brand and the product years ago. He worked for other companies. He worked in the industry, so a lot of learning curves there, and seeing what worked, what didn't work, and as we've built Renegade, looking at okay, what worked, but what could work better, and tweaking the formulas, looking at the chemistry, improving the products all the time to create a better fuel and do something a little bit different than what our competitors are doing. So that's kind of the big advantage there. And in the private world, the VPL where we make for other people, some people take advantage of that and say, hey, we want your package. And then others bring their formulas to us and we just manufacture their products the way they want to manufacture.
Okay. As far as I guess could any company just do that as far as being a manufacturer for you guys, or is there I know it's not necessarily your field, I would say, but can any company just become, I guess, where you guys are manufacturing their product, or is there a certain...
Yeah, no, I mean, if somebody came to us and want us to, and
Yeah.
we get that sometimes, we'll have people come in like a smaller groups, and we work with some racing associations and want to do their own fuel for their own product.
Yeah.
When you mentioned the 93, that's been a popular one in some circuits out there around the country. They're like, but we want a unique formula. So we can work with them to develop a product and manufacture and sell it to them, and we'll package it with their labeling, or if that's what they want, or we use our labeling, but something that identifies it's for their series only type of fuel. So it comes down to like any manufacturing process, what they're looking for in the volume, and as long as it kind of fits our business model, then do it. But
Right.
Because when you mentioned earlier the difference between OEM and the racing world, we still have the EPA that we have to deal with. Yeah, we're not getting the fuel certified for modern Detroit vehicles, although we do have street legal fuels for today's modern day fuels. I don't want to mislead folks to think that we don't have products that will work in their Hellcat or their C7 Vet or their 370Z with a two turbos on instead of, but nonetheless, we have those products, but we still have the EPA to deal with. So, they look at our plant, they monitor what we do, and there's things, people don't even realize, like you have to have air permits. Well, you manufacture X amount of product, you have to be permitted to do that and make sure you have the right ventilation, the right cleaning systems. And so there's a lot to it from that aspect that we're still under that scrutiny.
Okay. Have y'all ever gotten a company come to you and lay... they want it made this specific way, which is completely different than the way you guys do it, that it might interfere with production, or have y'all ever had to turn anyone away for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of times over the years where we've had to look at a project and say, hey, that looks great, but it just isn't going to work in our production environment because of things just like that, where it was unique enough or different enough. We look at it and go, interesting approach, but...
Yeah.
For us to manufacture it, it would impede our other manufacturing processes too much to stop everything and try to build. We tend to call those boutique fuels to try to build that one-off special formula. We'll do it if we can. But yeah, there has been over the years. There's been a couple times where we've had to say, we just can't do it for you.
What is their goal usually? What special formula are they trying to achieve?
People play with chemistry all the time. I mean, it's kind of human nature. So there's a lot of folks out there that, and there's a lot of folks have a lot of knowledge that may not necessarily be doing this for a living, but it doesn't mean they're bad chemists. Okay.
Well, yeah. No, I'm saying.
So
that
yeah,
either.
and so I say sometimes the things they've brought to us go, hey, yeah, that looks interesting, but it doesn't work out in our manufacturing to do what you need to do. But from that aspect, what makes it, the combination they put together, it has potential, or it's something maybe that just really hasn't been tested, and you kind of go, yeah, that might work, but it might
I don't
not.
know about it, bud.
Yeah, so we'd like for you to do more R&D and before you decide to settle on that.
Now, do y'all ever take some of those ideas and not necessarily take on the project, but bring them into testing and try and see if there is any benefit to them?
We actually have done that. We actually help companies develop or improve their products on some of the stuff we build. So some of the stuff that we do on the private label world, we've actually worked with the companies, and a couple of them have been some pretty interesting, I won't say wholesale changes, but quite a bit of change to their chemistry, and generated a product that performed a lot better and in that world for them. And so that's kind of the fun stuff on our side when we get to do that. To look at that and say, hey, we don't ever, we'd never steal anything. It's not like somebody,
Of course not.
we're talking about comes in and says, hey, it's a great formula. We look at it, go, oh, it's interesting. Yeah, we can't do it, but then we go do it.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah,
at
no,
all, but-
I get it. I just want folks to misunderstand that because anytime we have a client like that, we all sign NDAs, non-disclosures, and say, hey, we're not going to share because we don't want you sharing ours and whatever. So we have, those good conversations. But to your point, sometimes you just got to say, yeah, we can't do that. But the fun stuff is when we do it, they come to us and, hey, we'd like for you to do this. And, then you talk to them a little bit and go, well, is there anything, are there any challenges you have on your product? And they go, well, yeah, we got a great product. We're making good money with it, but it does, here, it does this, this, and this, once in a while or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, well, do you want to fix that? So, can't guarantee we can always fix it, but we love to try. And we've been very successful over the years improving products for folks. And which helps their business, which helps our business, and helps the racers, the end thing.
True, yeah. What's a unique scenario, I guess, along those lines that you've had to deal with or fixed a problem that was very unique in its own aspect?
Really can't
Nothing
go
to
down
pinpoint,
specifics
really?
there because it kind of points out who we work for, who we're working
Oh,
with,
okay,
or whatever.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. We're good.
Yeah, so from that standpoint, but like I said, it really to help. Comes down to the chemistry, whether their product burns cleaner, some of the things that we benefit from, cleaner burning, better combustion, more complete combustion, better power output. Those are usually the end goals where they struggle with something maybe a little bit or, or certain applications. And we say, okay, maybe we can tweak your formula and it works better in that application.
Okay, cool. Oh, yeah. All right, well, I guess another part of the fueling topic that I wanted to touch on was leaded versus unleaded. Obviously, your average person is going to know what unleaded is. Like, that's on every gas station. It's everywhere. But you don't often hear what leaded fuel is. So, and I know it's not commonly used anymore, I guess, in motorsports, right?
No.
Or is it still...
It's the most popular fuel manufactured in motorsports.
Okay. So what is the common difference between leaded and unleaded? Why is it useful?
It's a great question.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yep, absolutely. Super question. So leaded fuel uses tetraethyl lead. So tetraethyl lead was not discovered but in the late 1800s, but brought into fuels in the early 20s. Standard Oil Company and a number of the major oil manufacturers, they needed to raise octane and bring the octane up because they were starting to build more powerful engines, more compression, and they needed the detonation protection. Tetraethyl lead is a very cost-effective way. Well, it was. Now that we're in an unleaded world, it becomes a more expensive product. But tetraethyl lead was a very good way to raise octane effectively. And that's why we still see, if you need an octane, you got your Turbo Z car and you're pushing out 40 pounds of boost, you're going to be in a leaded fuel or you're going to be in an alcohol.
That's a lot of boost.
Yeah, we got guys doing 40, 45, 50 pounds of boost, and I'm just like, whoa.
Nope, I got boost cut at 20.
Yeah, so they're going to need more octane, so they're going to have to be up into the leaded fuels to get the octane. You just can't get there in an unleaded world right now. All of us are working on that, looking at, how can we get the octanes up in the unleaded world. And that's one of the things that, we want folks to make sure when they're looking at and see octane numbers out there, make sure they're looking at the RM2, that there's both sides. Because there's, folks, like in Europe, they just use the research number. So somebody's like, oh, this is 113 octane. Well, that's the research number. The motor number's like 87. So you've got an average of about a 91 pump gas here. So we want to make sure that they understand that difference. But that's the big difference. There's a lot of talk with leaded fuels about valve seats. One of the byproducts of using a leaded fuel is that as you burn the lead off, there's a little bit of residue that gets left on the exhaust valve and the exhaust valve seat. Well, back in the old days, that was beneficial because it kind of cushions it and the exhaust valve gets so hot. There's a lot of what they call micro welding of the valve touching the seat. And that lead residue burning off helped kind of cushion that and keep that from happening. But that was never the reason lead was in fuel. It had solely to do with octane. As of 1975, as we know, catalytic converters were required in the U.S. By 1980 on the 3/4 ton trucks, and then I think 85 for 1 ton. So everything today is in a catalytic converter world. Well, with a catalytic converter on there, you generate a lot of heat to do what it needs to do. So everybody had to go to hardened valve seats. So if you have anything 75 or later, it's got to have hardened valve seats in it. the need for lead as far as valve seats is non-existent. So that's a non-issue anymore. We're back to, can you get enough octane without lead?
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. And that's where the alcohols have gotten really popular. You take like an E85, it really only has about a 100 octane level, but because of the cooling effect, it performs like a 110. It'll support a lot more compression than a 100 octane gasoline would.
Jesus Christ. I don't, obviously, if you can't tell, I don't especially after this conversation, I don't know nothing about fuel. I feel very dumb with this conversation. I guess, okay, then you mentioned methanol too.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to dive a little deeper into methanol.
Sure.
Because I hear methanol all the time. You hear it's used in motorsports, but I couldn't even tell you what specific motorsports use methanol the most.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, probably from that aspect, drag racing and circle track racing has been the two biggest ones. Indy cars ran on it for years, and then the ethanol industry got involved with IndyCar and moved them to ethanol instead of methanol on that aspect. But methanol is a pure chemical by itself, pure derivative of petroleum. So it is has a what we call a blend octane value of about 113. Okay. But when we look at the stoichiometric ratio, with gasoline, it's 14.7 to 1. So you need 14.7 parts of air to combust 1 part of fuel.
Okay.
So with methanol, it's only 6.4. So you have a lot more oxygen, but you have to burn a lot more of it. And that's the downside to methanol is you got to burn about 2.5 times more because it has a lot lower BTU value, a lot less heat energy, so you got to burn more of it. That's where it gets confusing. And I'll be honest, for years I had that question. It's like everybody's like, well, you can make more torque, about 20% gain. In the old days, I think with modern fuel technology, the gap's a lot closer. Yeah. But they'd say, yeah, you can make more torque on methanol, but you got to burn 2.5 times more. I'm like, well, why do I want to burn? Why not just stay on this gas? Seems to me that's a push.
Yeah.
But what it is you got to look how much fuel can you combust in a given period of time. So when you look at gasoline, has like 116,000 BTU, let's say. So we burn a gallon of it in an hour. But with methanol, we can burn 2.5 times that. Well, the BTU is only about 58,000, but 2.5 times is about 130,000 BTU total, where with gasoline, I could only combust 116. That's more heat energy. That's more power. So that's where you do get more power typically on the methanol and even the ethanols. But the consumption's higher.
That would factor in more cooling effect too, right?
It does have that's the big advantage, and that's why it's so popular, particularly in circle track racing. A lot of the drag racing, like the blown alcohol cars, they don't even use a cooling system because they get enough cooling to the fuel. There's no water in those engines. They're dry engines. Yep.
Okay, so then on, I guess just your average drag setup that you would run methanol on, how much of a temperature difference are you seeing purely from methanol?
Oh, it's a bunch. The couple of the downsides of methanol is, obviously to launch the car, you got to be at a certain RPM temperature range.
Yeah.
So, if you want it 130, 140 degrees when we leave the starting line, or 150, with methanol, the guys have trouble even building enough heat. So
they can't even get it to
they'll
that.
be sitting in the staging lanes. There'll be 12 cars back, and they're already running.
With no cooling system?
No, with cooling systems.
Okay.
The blown alcohol cars, they're towing up, making a 5-second pass, and then towing back.
Gotcha.
But on your average racer, they're going to have a wet cooling system just like all of us do. But yeah, we would sit there and just move up in the line and stop, move up in the line and stop. They'll leave their car running, because they're trying to build enough heat to launch the car. They'll make a pass down the track and get off the track and maybe be 160 degrees.
Man.
So
it has a cool luxury to have.
Yeah, it has a lot of cooling effect. But the downside is the volume of fuel you've got to go through, and methanol is corrosive. So
that was my next question, is how much it gums up everything inside, or
it doesn't really gum it up, it cleans it up.
Cleans it too good. Okay, gotcha. That's what it is.
So yeah, it really dries out the cylinder. So if you run an engine on methanol, you're going to have a lot more cylinder scarring, a lot more cylinder wear. You're going to rebuild that engine a lot quicker. And then for today's world, everything's fuel injected. So we've got to look at the injectors. Are they compatible with methanol? So, because the same thing happens there. You get the scoring of the pentals and stuff on there from the methanol, the lack of lubrication. Now, fortunately, companies, and we manufacture a top lube that we recommend you run with methanol to help put some of that lubricity back.
Yeah.
But gasoline, your 93 or even our 120s, any of those have way more lubricity than what methanol does. So it's like everything. There's no free lunch program here.
Of course.
What you get on one side, you pay for on another, and just kind
It's
of
always a give and take.
yeah. You got to pick your poison, if you will.
Jeez. Okay. And then just to touch on the temp stuff too, as far as the 110 goes, since that's the most popular, what is the average, I guess, temperature differences you'll get out of the 110, just in general?
Well, that's
I know it's going to be hard to say based off setup and stuff like
yeah,
that.
it really does. I mean, we say, and we've got the data. I mean, you've mentioned that here to the viewers. You know, that your 93 runs cooler. So I mean, we do believe our blends run cooler, cleaner, and more consistent, and we know it's due to the chemistry. But to put numbers on it, that's kind of hard to say. Because every engine's a little different. Depends how big's your cooling system. You know, how much radiator flow do you have? Do you have a shroud on there with your electric fan, or do you got the electric fan just zip tied right to the core? And you know, and some guys can get by with that.
Shroud your fan.
Other guys have to have everything. You know, the shroud, the fan, and everything, and they still run warm. So it's really hard to say, but we feel confident that if you were to compare brand X fuel to our fuel, you would see a drop in temperature. You know, maybe it's 3 or 4 degrees. Maybe it's, people like yourself have experienced 8 to 10 degrees. So that's really going to vary on their combination. But it's certainly their car should not run hotter.
Yeah.
At
I had
all.
a terrible, whenever I first put the Renegade in it, I had a horrible cooling system. It was a very bad flowing radiator it was a little banged up and stuff. And then intercooler setup was not ideal. The way everything was ran, a little too many couplers.
Sure.
So there was just some problems, but I couldn't even really drive it down the road into a pool just to get a data log without it getting hot or getting to about 220, which is hot for an RB. I know most of the LSs and stuff you guys deal with, that's just prime normal, but yeah, it was. I took it on a drive after putting Renegade in it, and it was about an 8-degree difference just on that fuel, which blew my mind. I didn't understand that. But now that I have the proper cooling system, I mean, I barely reach over 190.
That's awesome.
Which is wild, but
yeah, it's a combination of having everything right, and that's one of the challenges with with fuel and everything. Sometimes is we talk about having a little extra octane because the cars might not have an optimal intercooler and they're going to run a little hotter than they should or whatever. So having a couple extra points isn't a bad thing, but yeah, don't go crazy on it, because if you have to I got to run 120 or it detonates.
Yeah.
Dude, you're 8-to-1 with 3 pounds of boost. Okay, we need to find your problem and help you solve it first.
yeah, something else going on here.
Yeah,
Hold on.
and we're glad to talk to racers and help them with that. I mean, we're all racers, and like I said, it's, when people talk about what separates us, we talk about burns cooler, cleaner, more consistent. That's our chemistry, and that's our product. But it's our support, and again, we love doing this kind of thing. Talking with you folks, getting into other avenues that we don't spend our founder was a drag racer. I'm a drag racer, and we've got guys on the team that are into circle track, and we've got some guys that are into the off-road stuff. And but the drift world, our new marketing person, she's into drift world and Scotty D, and so it's kind of cool. It's an opportunity for us to learn more and
Shout out to you, Alyssa.
get to know you guys more, and find more racers that we can help, because it's the motorsports industry. It's our livelihood.
Oh yeah, big time. Well, I wanted to bring up as far as like running more consistently and efficiently, I find that to be very true. Just on the instance of my car, but I won't go into that spill. You've heard that a million times. But I had a buddy that was at an event that I was at. My car actually, I blew a drive shaft on the 3rd lap. So I was just there to do some test laps for an event coming up, and I was like, screw it, I'm going to hang out and help everyone else. But I had a buddy that was there, and he drove his car there, because we're drifters or cowboys like that. We'll drive our car and beat it to death. And he ran out of gas. And luckily he lived like 10 minutes away. He wasn't far, but like he just needed some gas to basically get home. So I was like, just take this. Go put some of it in there just to get you home or whatever. Go do a couple more laps. Have fun, like just to make sure you had a good day. And he put it in. He goes out and does like 2 laps, and then right before he went to leave to go home, he came over and was talking to me about it. He was like, dude, I don't understand what it is, but my car felt like it was way faster just after putting, now I don't know if that was like placebo effect for him. He was very new to drifting. You know, he's just getting his seat time ropes in, but I noticed myself that it seems a little bit more responsive. Not necessarily that it's faster, but it's a little bit more responsive. Is that a common thing to feel with the fuels, or is that just...
No, I think it is, and it kind of goes back into when we talk about, you know, cooler, cleaner, and more consistent. We talked about how it cools, but that's kind of a all-in-one package. So if you burn all the fuel, you get complete combustion. You're going to get all the fuel evaporated. That's going to give you maximum cooling, but it also gives you maximum performance. So just because you're putting gas in doesn't mean you're combusting all of it. So when you start to look at your exhaust, you see black in there. You'll see your plugs are dark. Part of that's your tune, but part of it's the fuel. Is it all combusting? And it's one of the things that folks notice with our fuel when they switch over. First thing I'll usually tell somebody, it's like, okay, I'm running a brand X, let's say 112 or 110 or 97, whatever it is. And I'll say, well, when you switch to our fuel, most of the time it's real close, should work. Don't change anything yet. Put the fuel in and run it. I said, you'll notice your plugs lighten up in the exhaust. That doesn't mean you're lean. That means you're getting complete combustion. So don't panic and start leaning everything out, because you'll see the performance gain on there. And that's where the example I like to use, so people can kind of conceptualize this, is, you know, we look at a campfire or something that's burnt versus like a house. So most of us have seen a building or a house that's half burnt, and you look, the wood's charred black.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's incomplete combustion. It didn't totally burn up. Compare that to a campfire. You get up the next morning, campfire, everything's gone. You know, what color's the ash in the bottom?
The whitish
It's
gray,
white or light gray. That's complete combustion. So when you see that dark black charcoal, that's unburned hydrocarbons that didn't combust. So that's where the other advantage, we get a complete combustion. So if you have complete combustion, you're burning all the fuel, you got to make a little more power. And at the same time, you're burning all the fuel, you get a little better latent heat of vaporization, you're going to get a little better cooling.
Yeah.
And if you burn it all and cool it all, there ain't nothing left to clean up. So
That's wild. Because, like, it's not a drastic difference. Like, we can all say it's not drastic, but, like, to be able to, for it to make enough of a difference where as a driver you can feel that. I know a lot of you are sitting there probably like, this dude's delusional. There's no way you can feel that. Like, yeah, okay. You can, especially coming from as bad as it seems our just regular civilian pump gas has gotten. So I'll plead for it always. But I guess when it comes to just motorsports and race fuels, and when would you suggest the time for someone that is contemplating whether they should jump to the race gas or just continue with pump gas for right now? When do you think the deciding factor needs to be?
yeah, that's a great question. I think that factor comes down to where they have the car, where they want it, or where they can. And I always say where they can afford to be at with it. I mean, we always want more than we can afford.
True, yeah.
You know, and Jenko's got a big catalog. There's a lot of stuff I'd like to have, but I can only afford so much. So we get the car where we want it. We get our driving ability comfortable so that it's matching the performance of the car. Now I think we take a look at it and say, okay, do I have the right fuel in there? Do I have my performance where it needs to be? So I think that's the case where, you know, we look at the cost to jump from a pump gas. If you have a combination that pump gas works, to moving into the race fuel, I think you want to make sure everything else is equal in ability at that point. You know, am I doing everything driving? Because there's nothing worse than spending more money and then not seeing the performance because it wasn't fuel related. Because first thing you're going to do is come back and say, well, you know, I tried that product and it didn't work.
Yeah, you're blaming the company.
Yeah, no, it's because you're blowing the tires off and you hit the wall 6 times, okay? That's not our fault. Well, it is, I guess, maybe if we made a little more power. But
yeah.
But so that's where I think it comes down to is look at your combination and, you know, you've maxed out what you can afford to max out. You feel pretty good about where you're at. Let's move into a better fuel and see if we improve your product or your program.
Absolutely. Well, there you go. Okay, well, I did want to ask, that was one of the questions I didn't put on the notes or anything, but what is one of the most common misconceptions about fuel that you hear in the industry or just from people in general considering race fuel?
Yeah, I mean, that comes back to the question of octane, and there's a lot of chatter, excuse me, you see out there on the internet, it's like octane slows down the burn rate of fuel. absolutely craziest thing in the world to even conceive. I mean, when you think about it, it's like, okay, we're going to turn our race engine twice as hard as our passenger car engine.
Yeah.
So if I'm speeding the engine up double, that means my pistons at top dead center half the time. If I slow down the burn rate, it ain't going to burn because you don't have the time left, okay? So, yeah, that clearly doesn't pass the sniff test, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, that's the biggest misconception of what it really is and what it really does. And so I love the fact you guys led off with that question because that's the big challenge out there for people to understand. And, and like I said, you know, they want to buy more octane. And unfortunately, there's been some companies over the years that have really over-octane folks. And it's not a total bad thing because, first of all, if they over-octane them, they're not going to hurt their engine from the fuel. Okay, now, did they leave power on the table? Yeah. Did they empty their wallet? Yeah. That's the downside. Not for the company, but the company's going to get no callback, and they're going to make good profits. So that's where, you know, again, of the things, and that's why we love doing these kind of shows. That's not who we are, and we want to educate people so we get them in the right choice on there. With a little, like I said, always like a little buffer because things don't always go as planned in racing.
Absolutely, yeah. And anyone considering racing should know that. That should be common knowledge.
Yeah.
Don't go complaining about stuff. Understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm glad that y'all cater to the audience in that aspect instead of just, you know, brushing them off and like then you just lost a customer. Yeah, they may have just blown a bunch of money with you, but you know, they're never going to be your customer again. So that's a good long-term thing that I love that y'all take care of. So just want to give a round of applause for that. But no, I do want to get into more oil stuff as well.
Sure.
Because I personally run the oil too. So I guess, what all oils do you guys even carry?
Okay.
Other than just motor oil?
Yeah, in the oil, motor oil is our lubricant line right now consists of just the motor oils.
Okay.
We've looked at bringing other things online, but you get too much online, you get away from the core of what you really do, and fuel and oil is kind of where we've been. But we're still looking at, and we've got a new person on board that we've kind of groomed to be our oil specialist. And he's looking at opportunities for us of needs of racers. You know, what do you need to go along with the oil? What do you need to go here? What's the next product? But again, I think our core is still going to be around that oil. So we have a mineral-based line. There's still a lot of racers out there that want a mineral-based oil. But our probably our most popular line is our semi-synthetic brand of racing oil.
In what ways would a mineral-based oil be most beneficial?
Well, I think on the older engines and things that weren't really designed for synthetics or synthetic type oils, but again, it kind of goes back. Here's an interesting scenario for you. So, and I struggle with this one myself. In talking with the OEMs, we know when you buy a car today, every OEM, the car comes with fully synthetic oil in it. Nobody sells a car today with anything less than synthetic oil in it.
Yeah.
Yet every piston ring manufacturer, go down the list from, Seal Power on down the list, they all recommend breaking the engine in on mineral-based oil, non-synthetic oil. Yeah. But yet Detroit doesn't, okay, and the Japanese don't. So those engines don't get an oil change before it goes into the car.
Yeah.
So I struggle with that on that aspect. So I think with the mineral-based oils, it's not going to have some of the properties, the synthetic properties in there, so you can ensure good ring seal and everything. So I think that's the premise. And I think it's just information. A lot of folks are still, this is what I've always used, it's what's always worked. I'm afraid to make that change into that semi-synthetic or a full synthetic world. So I think that's the premise, and that's why we still carry it in a few of our lines. We have the mineral based. Obviously, we do the break-in oil, the 30-weight.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is that what the break-in oil technically is?
Yeah, it's a 30-weight mineral-based break-in oil. Yeah, just to make sure we get good, ring to cylinder wall seating on there and get a good break-in and a good seal there. So, but again, I think a lot of it goes back to horror stories over the years. I don't know. A lot of our racer viewers probably may not have ever heard of the old Arco graphite days, but
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, Atlantic Richfield back, and I was young at the time. Working right out of high school, working on cars, paying my way through college, and they came out with, Atlantic Richfield came out with Arco Graphite. They put graphite into the oil. Super slick. I mean, great lubricant. But it was so slick that putting it in engines that had already had the rings seated and running regular based oils, it was, you knew the car came in because when you lifted the hood, oil would be dripping from the underneath the hood. It'd be all over the ground.
Jesus.
Every seal in the engine, because it was so slick, the seals at the time weren't designed to wick it back.
Oh, okay.
And so
yeah.
between going past the rings, because it's so slick,
Wow.
going past the seals, it created a lot of, it was only out there a couple of years, and they pulled it from the market. It was just, not that the lubricant was bad, it was almost too good for the technology
The
of the
industry
engines
just
at the
wasn't
time.
there, yeah.
The industry, yeah, the seals and everything on the engines. Fast forward to today, we're making seals that can wick back the lubrication properties of synthetics and everything, so they work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of bad experience. It's kind of like we deal with ethanol in fuels from the old days back in the 70s when they after the gas embargo in the early 70s, they came out with ethanol and gas. Well, it was eating up filters, and none of the O-rings and carburetors and stuff were designed to deal with it. So,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it's terrible. It's ruining everything. Well, then it did, but that's not where we are today.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's the big premise with a lot of the mineral-based folks. Still just don't want to make that change, feel comfortable with it. And I've always kind of said, hey, if it works, why change?
Absolutely.
But at the same time, if you want to go faster, you want to do something a little better, you got to be willing to change and try things.
You got to make the risk.
Got to make the risk.
Absolutely. Well, I guess along those lines, the synthetic side of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, you hear synthetic all the time. A majority of civilian vehicles are ran off synthetic oil nowadays, especially being 0-20, which is mind-boggling. My Silverado runs off of 0-20, and ever since I bought that truck, it's boggled my mind. But explain synthetic oils, semi-synthetic, like what actually makes it synthetic oil?
Okay, so it has to do with what we call the base stocks. So when we look at like a mineral-based oil, a lot of it was paraffin-based, kind of a wax paraffin base,
Okay.
distillates and the things that we built the oil with. Then came, with our modern chemistry and engineering, came ways to manipulate some of those base chemicals, change the atomic structures, and make them a better product. And synthetics definitely have that advantage to have a stronger film strength and still be a thinner oil. And that's why today we're able to see 0W20s. I think Toyota's got a 016 out.
No
That's
way.
the OEM oil.
That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about, we're talking about the weight of oil, the viscosity is rated based compared to water. That's the standard.
Right.
So essentially, zero weight is the same viscosity as water. And to think that I'm putting that in my engine and it's going to protect it, certainly in the mineral-based days, that's not going to happen. We've got to have thicker oil. But with the technology of the synthetics and the stronger film strengths of the manufactured properties, if you will, they can thin the oil down, which is beneficial. We can have tighter clearances. If we have thinner oil, it can move through the engine faster.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we learned from one of our engine builders several years back. He was using our 20W50 race oil like thousands of folks do. And he was doing vintage engines. And he asked us about doing a 10W40 in the race grade oil with the high zinc and everything that we
Yeah.
have in the race grade. So we did a batch for him, and he ran it on the dyno. And it was really interesting because at temperature, he went from 60 psi of oil pressure to 57, which we thought, okay, thinner oil, you're going to lose a little oil pressure. But what we didn't consider is how much cooling the oil does. We knew oil has a lot of cooling effect on the engine, but we didn't think about as much.
I've always been told the more capacity of oil, obviously, is going to bring down temps.
Yeah, not only the capacity, but being able to move the oil. What he gained was 400 gallons an hour in oil flow, moving from
way.
2050 to 1040, 400 gallons an hour on oil flow through the engine.
Okay.
And that's huge as far as moving a lot of heat and getting it into the oil. So it kind of supported what we've seen, the movement with the OEMs and everybody moving to the thinner oils. You got smaller engines, running them harder. You only have so much oil capacity. if I can get the oil moving through there faster and easier, still maintaining the film strength so I don't have metal-to-metal contact,
Right.
but I can get the volume moving, I'll have better cooling, that engine's going to last longer. And what do we see today? I mean, OEM cars, dealers are selling cars with 100,000, 150,000 miles on it. Growing up, in my days, those cars were junk by 100,000 miles, and today they're just broke in. So
Yeah.
certainly the chemistry works and the technology. And we're seeing a lot of race engine builders move to a little bit lower viscosities, frees up horsepower. The pump's you're not eating as much of the engine
Yeah.
power to pump the oil. But again, there's also the benefits of the cooling effect and the flow.
Yeah. Well, and you always hear that, like, you want to, for motorsports and stuff, especially in drifting, being at higher RPM, you want to run a heavier weight oil to kind of balance for that. But I've always kind of played that line too. I'm always thinking of, well, doesn't that slow down the engine or make the movement of everything internally move slower because everything's thicker, and where do you find that balance? So I run the 15 weight. So I tried to kind of play that middle ground, and it seems to work for me right now. But what are your thoughts on that, as far as should you bump it up or should you not, or how do you determine what weight you should run? That's probably the simplest way to ask that.
Yeah, sure. No, that's a great question that gets asked a lot. It really comes down to the engine builder. Because first thing we got to look at it, what are the clearances? What are the bearing clearances? The OEM world are fitting bearings to the 10,000th of an inch, where we used to fit the rods, 1 to 2 thousandths on the rods, maybe 3, 2.5, 3 on the mains if it's a drag motor or something,
Right.
loose so that we didn't have a lot of drag. But if I'm going to road race or I'm going to spin this thing up and drift and, hit 8,000 and hold it there for a lap and a half, I probably need to tighten it up because it's going to beat itself to death. So I'm going to have a thinner oil to get through there. So a lot of that comes down to the engine builder and how the engine's designed. But kind of to your point earlier is that as oil gets hot, it's going to thin down. Okay, the viscosity is going to get thinner. So that's why a lot of folks know if I'm going to put the engine in that environment that it's not normally in, I probably do need a heavier oil because it's going to thin at the higher RPM. The downside of that is if you're not in that heat range and it's cooler, it is going to be thicker than what you need. You could starve the engine for oil flow, and you could also be giving up power. So there's a balance there, and that's where that multi-viscosity oils have really become beneficial in that performance world. And that's, I think, the 2050 is so popular because it's the 2050, a 20W means the winter weight at 0, it's 20 degrees, the equivalent of 20 weight oil at 0 degrees.
Yeah.
But at 100 degrees, it's the equivalent of 50 weight oil. So you kind of got the best of both worlds. If we go out to run this weekend and the temperature drops in the 50s, hey, my oil's 20, 30 weight oil. If it's going to be 96 to 100, it'll get to 50 weight, and I've got the protection I need.
Yeah, so it also plays off of climate and stuff like that too, elevation, like that.
All of that is going to determine how hot the engine gets. I mean, ultimately, it's the heat in the engine, but the hotter it is outside, the hotter that engine's going to run for sure.
Okay, so let's say this then. If I lived in Florida, you're sea level, and then you want to go up to, say, Colorado, up in the mountains, and take your car up there for an event. We're going to stick with drifting just because it's high RPM, high all of that. Is that a good enough reason to want to change the weight of your oil, or should you want to keep it more consistent and maybe focus on changing tune or something like that instead?
There could be, depending on what you're running. If you're running a straight weight oil or really tight, like the 2050 versus a 5W50. So I think the tighter the window is there, you might want to adjust. You get up to higher altitude, it's cooler. The other thing is when we look at liquids, the boiling point drops with altitude.
Yeah.
So, you're going to get some of the moisture burns off a little bit better, so the oil's going to not deteriorate as bad in that high temperature, because that's one of the things that people miss, and drag racers are terrible about it because we don't ever get 230, 240 degrees in our oil typically. We're going to warm the engine up, and then we make a pass, and we come back, and then it might be an hour before we make another pass or whatever.
Yeah.
So people don't realize when they talk about oil sludging the engine up, we're more apt to do it than anybody because you've got to heat the oil up to boil off the byproducts, the excess gasoline, the combustion gases,
Yeah,
the moistures and those things. And if you don't get the oil hot, you don't burn those off, then you're more apt to get sludge buildup, which is more detrimental than having the wrong oil in
That's
those.
crazy.
Yeah. So it's a balancing act. So kind of to circle back to your question, I think if it's a big elevation and temperature change, then you might look at, is my oil still in the window on
Yeah,
there? And if I've got a good multi-viscosity, I probably am. But
That's why I tried to pick Florida versus Colorado, because usually you're going to have
yeah,
stinky, hot, humid
yeah.
Florida, and then really freezing cold temperatures in Colorado, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, if you're a Miami
So-
racer, you know, and you're going to
Yeah.
going to Colorado or somewhere, then yeah, you're probably looking at needing to adjust the viscosity of the oil because of the temperature differential for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, then I guess as far as the difference in, more specifically, race lubricants versus just your average run-of-the-mill oils that you can buy off the shelf at your parts store, why would you consider going to a race oil versus
Okay.
just your average oil?
So the big difference is the what we call the zinc diphosphate, the ZDDP. So it's a package of zinc, then you've got the phosphate and the calcium. There's a package that you put together that creates the extra lubrication in the oil.
Okay.
What happened in our industry, and it was interesting because about 2000, cam manufacturers, particularly flat tappet cams, started seeing massive malfunctions. You know, lobe failures of the cams, lifter failures, and obviously the racers and engine builders did as well.
Of course.
They're going back to the manufacturers, and the manufacturers like, oh, well, we must have bad metallurgy. You know, they're doing all this research trying to figure out. They didn't realize that the EPA had cut the zinc level to a maximum of 1,200 parts per million as of the 2000
Yeah.
model year. So it turns out it wasn't necessarily bad metallurgy. It was the right metallurgy for that type of oil. Take away the lubricating properties, wrong metallurgy for that.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
they figured that out. And then in 2005, the EPA lowered it to 800 parts per million, which is the standard today. So that's why all the cam manufacturers recommend putting in an additive on break-in and everything to get that additional lubricant in there for that break-in period. So the racing oils are going to have a high package, high zinc package. Because of that, they can't be API certified. So that's why if you look at an oil, and that gets confusing, there's some brands out there that say racing oil, but they have the little Starburst API symbol. If it has the Starburst, that means it has to be 800 parts per million or less. I think it's 850 total is actually a window they can actually go up to. But it's a very low percentage of that. Now, they're trying to make that up with some other chemicals, but that old
Okay, I was
package...
about to ask, how do they get to market it that way then? as far
Yeah,
as
well, and
race oil?
that's why the racing oil world exists and where it stays, because your good engine builders are going to use a race grade oil.
Gotcha,
And so if you got a pure racing grade oil, it's not going to have that API symbol on there, and it's going to have a lot higher ZDDP package in it. Ours is like one of the highest in the industry at 3,000 parts per million. But it's proven, time proven, it works, and you just don't have the engine wear and the issues. Are there other technologies that might get you there and be EPA certified? Yeah, but you know, again, it's a pay-for-play performance one, and sure, there can be some oils out there that might meet both worlds, but you're looking, you know, $15 to $30 a quart, and starts to put stuff out of range of the average racer.
Absolutely. Good Lord. Okay, then, well, I want to settle a myth that, well, I think it's a myth, at least, that parts store oil, you know, you got your O'Reilly's brand right there on the shelf, and then you got your Motul or your Pennzoil or whatever. You always hear that, don't worry about it. They're all the same. Just grab one, whatever the cheapest sell is, or whatever, just for your daily or your tow rig or whatever. Is that a myth? Are they all the same, or are they all different in their own way?
They're all somewhat different, but that's the benefit of the certification, the API certification, and everything on the oil is they have got to meet the standard that the American Petroleum Institute sets forth, and they get their data from the engine, you know, Detroit, the car manufacturers and the Japanese car manufacturers say, you know, they have a JSO certification, and we've got to meet their standard because they've done the research and testing with their metallurgy and their engine technology that here's the properties the oil has to have for our engines to survive. So you kind of get that guarantee. It's like your little symbol of guarantee on there. So all the oils that are manufactured to be street legal are going to have that circle of guarantee, if you will. Are they all the same? No. I mean, everybody has their own version of how they blend it and what they put in. You used to hear a thing about oil's oil. The oil doesn't go bad like the old Castrol commercials, thermal breakdown. The oil doesn't break down and go bad, the base oil, it's the additives.
Okay.
So, and that's what varies from every company has their own additive package that they put into the oil. So to say, and it's kind of a long answer to your question, to say
It needs it though.
yeah, I mean, to say they're all the same, no, they're not. Everybody has their own way they get there and their own package that they feel is either the best for performance or the best for meeting the performance needs and still being profitable. I mean, for whatever the metric is, everybody's version is everybody's version. What I do like to say, though, for folks is, because that comes out all the time, it's like, well, I need to change my oil, but, I'm a Pennzoil guy, and there's only got Quaker State in this town. I can't get my oil changed. Here's the thing. Clean oil of any kind is better than dirty oil of your kind.
This is true. This is true.
And it's
I always say for drifting, just go ahead and change your oil every event. It's just, you'll be better off.
Yeah, that's not bad advice at all, because it's, like I said, having good oil, it's the lifeblood of the engine, and making sure that it's good, it's clean, and can do its job the way we need it to do its job. Certainly I don't think that's bad advice at all.
Oh my god. All right, well, I do want to ask about the some of the oil that's coming out nowadays, the recycled stuff. Like recycled. What is the benefit of recycled oil? Is it even a benefit? It seems kind of nonsense to me,
Price.
like a marketing thing.
It's
more than
price.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like to my point earlier on the statement I made, the base oil theoretically doesn't go bad. It's the additive packages in it that fail. So their industries are taking the oil, and with the manufacturing technology we have today, they're able to go in and clean the oil, strip the additives out of it, any of the stuff that's bad for the oil, put a package back in, reblend it, and then sell that product. So if you're starting with a product that you've bought cheap or got given to you from all the places that are changing oil, there's very little cost in that other than handling and processing.
Yeah.
So they can blend an oil. And that comes a question all the time: is recycled oil as good as first-time use oil?
There's no way.
Yeah, it's.
I know you probably can't say that, but I'm gonna say there's no way.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I've been asked that a lot over the years, and I struggle with that one myself, because it's like, if you make a product and you put it together for the first time, everything fits well. You put the chemistry together and everything that attaches. If I'm using blend stocks that are a gathering of everybody's, am I going to get all the other stuff out of there? Probably not, always. Maybe enough, but not all of it. And is there compatibility issues with what I'm going to put back in? Can I get it blended in if this stuff still has a little bit of content? I just think there's a lot of variables there that concern me. On the other side, I have not seen any research or any data to say that, under no circumstances use recycled oil, it doesn't work. So, in fact, I've had several companies over the years show me data sheets and things in testing that they've done that shows it's performing equal to the good oils. But I'm a little bit old school, I guess, like you, and I still struggle with that a little bit.
It's something I couldn't put my full trust in. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, also, the stuff like Royal Purple, I do want to ask about that, as far as, like, because it's bright purple. Like, does that not ever cause any effect, or, like, is that an additive just to make it that color?
When you manufacture the chemicals, the raw chemicals, a lot of times will determine the colors, and that's what's unique with our oils are blue.
Yeah.
So you pour our oil and you go, whoa, what's this? So it's in the refining, the chemical composition you put together, and then you can tint the oil to create what
a little bit
you're
more
looking for.
Dramatic effect, yeah.
Yeah, what I like about it is, one of the things that people talk about all the time, you hear about the old green oil. Everybody's real big on that, and that was the Kindle GT1 30 weight back in the 70s, and everybody ran it, and it was good oil, and you kind of liked it because you saw it change from green to darker. You could say, hey, this oil's getting pretty dirty and yucky, and time to change. What's unique, though, when that oil got dirty and just yucky and you couldn't see through it, what I love about our oil with being blue is it will still maintain a translucence to it. So it will darken up as it gets dirty. I mean, oil's going to get dirty in the engine.
Of course.
But if you kind of pour it and look at the light, you can still see some translucency to it, which to me gives you the ability to really check your oil and say,
Diagnose
okay,
stuff better,
yeah, how's
yeah.
it getting there? Am I seeing anything? Is it looking abnormal? It just gives us a little better viewpoint. So that's one of the things that we do with our oil to kind of help racers. You can't always get an oil analysis every race.
Yeah.
There's time to ship it off and get it done and cost and everything, but it kind of gives you an extra window of opportunity to see what's happening with the oil. And because people always, how often should I change my oil? Well, to your point, if you can do it every race, that's great. But some folks, our racing budgets may not allow that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you try to make a judgment call there, and the better we can kind of analyze it ourselves and see, certainly not saying that we can eyeball it and go, hey, the chemistry's this. But anything we can do to make that easier for a person to make a judgment call on, where's my oil, how diluted, contaminated is it getting, do I need to change, is a benefit. And that's one of the things I think our oils help folks with.
Yeah. Along the lines of the Royal Purple stuff, it seems like their marketing is directed towards like a race oil that's meant for the street. Is that just like terminology, or is there some actual concrete scientific proof behind it, or?
Well, I think
I'm not trying to like bash Royal Purple.
Oh no,
or anything
absolutely.
either. I'm just you hear it so much because they're such a well-known brand that.
Yeah, and they're a great brand. Like it's just like the race fuels. I think almost all the brands on the market are good products. It's I think what's out there is proven in the racing world is good. But you always have like that good, better, best, and you got to kind of look at what makes it best. Is it just price, or is it performance and price? I mean, everybody's got different value sets, how they've got to divide that up.
Right.
But I think in that case, I think they make the claim. They make a great racing oil product, and just like we do with race fuels and race oils, the stuff that we make for the streets, we use the same technology. We're going to apply that where we can. Can we do everything? No, I can't run the zinc content way up on it and be API certified. And I can't use lead in my fuel to give you a 120 unleaded fuel because the law says I can't put the lead in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we can look at the blend technology, the manufacturing technology, the chemical technology, and hey, where can I use some of the stuff I've learned in the performance world to make this street application just a little bit better? So I think that's probably there's probably some validity to what they're saying. I would hope that they're applying that learning to all their product line.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. I want to ask you kind of in the same light as the fuel stuff. And when it comes to motorsports, when would be that designated time to start thinking about transferring over to a race oil?
Yeah, I think when you look at the inch, I think it's a good time anytime. We talked about the performance on the fuel side. Does your performance match the fuel? Is your car where it needs to be, that I need to spend the additional dollars and get the fuel program right? Yeah. I think the oil is probably a little more critical because it's the lifeblood. I mean, I missed my tune-up a little bit. That's going to be harder on the oil, especially if you go lean, it's going to be hot. They're cooking stuff. You go too rich, you're washing the oil down. So I think from the oil standpoint, it's a good move right up front because the engine's one of the most expensive things we have in a race car, and anything we can do to ensure it's going to live. So that's one I think, let's do the race oil, save the engine as best we can, hope the rest of our
More
program.
affordable too, I would say.
Yeah, and hope our program comes around enough, then we make it to race fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that's good advice. I came up with a couple more questions that I didn't necessarily put into this, but while we were going through it, I kind of they popped up. So as far as the way just regular civilian driving in cars and stuff are going with electric cars, where is your stance on that? And do you ever see a possibility for oil companies, fuel companies, somehow working their way into that industry? I don't know how it would be, but
Well, I think from that standpoint, every company's got to look at, and that has came up. I mean, we have, part of the management team, and that discussions came up. Say, hey, this,
We got to start thinking about this.
EV world, what's our business model look like in 15 years? What's it look like in 20, 25 years? I don't think America's ever going to give up the internal combustion engine.
No, we better not.
I just don't think it's going to happen. I think there's a place for that in the marketplace. But I don't think and we're seeing that I think we're already seeing that. Volvo had originally said by 2019 they're going to do electric cars. That didn't happen. Mary Barra came on and said, GM will be all electric by 2030, 2035, and now they've already backed out of that. Ford's closing a battery plant. They're not building the second one. So everybody's realized, that's farther down the road than we think. And honestly, the battery technology is just not there to do what the car does. But that being said,
the electric grid is not there. That's
and the electrical grid. I mean, there's a lot of challenges,
sustain it.
and then there's the social side of people haven't thought about. It's like, okay, if we could flip the switch tomorrow, what do you do with the oil industry? That's one of the largest industries in America. Those people got to have jobs.
Yeah.
Are they all going to flip over
I
somehow?
realize how quick the economy just pollutes.
So you've
after
got
something
infrastructure,
like
and you've got that. So there's going to be a lot. So while it's going to play a part, and I think it's going to continue to come in. There's, like I said, a lot of electric vehicle racing going on now, and it's growing. But I don't think that's bad, because anytime you have new technology, it creates opportunity. So back to kind of your original question, I think every company that's in motorsports is somehow looking at the electric world and go, okay, where do we fit into that? Clearly on our side, making fuel and oil is a little more challenging.
We're going to make battery acid or something?
But there's still chemicals involved. There's other technologies involved, and somewhere along the line, stuff we do probably has some matriculation into something that's being done in that electric world. So today, I can tell you we don't have an answer for that, but I can tell you while it's not our focus, it certainly has a spot on the long-term plan.
It's got to.
A placeholder, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm starting to see it a lot in like dirt bikes and four-wheelers, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see, because some of that stuff they're fast, dude. Absurdly fast.
There is, and kind of interesting, my son's been into the slot car stuff since he grew up working in a hobby shop and got to the point where people were paying him to run their cars.
That's
it's
awesome, dude.
It was the stupidest thing I ever saw. You're paying this kid to race your cars for you. Good gig for him. But nonetheless, what I've gathered out of that is kind of working with him on what he does, not doing it for him. He knows way more about it than I do. But seeing when you talking about technologies and cleaners and oils and lubricants and stuff they use on parts and pieces, and even in the electric world, I think there's definitely performance opportunities of all kinds that haven't been explored yet.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Well, another one that I wanted to bring up is, which I think would probably be more promising, make more sense, should be hydrogen. Hydrogen-based cars. So what is your thoughts on that whole concept? Do you see that happening a little bit sooner than electric probably, or not at all?
Well, I think I've always been a proponent. Like I said, I taught at a college automotive program for 35 years and was department chair there. And we worked with all the OEMs. We had GM, Ford, Toyota programs in. But I've always felt that as we look at alternative technology, hydrogen is one of the most plentiful elements in the universe. It's very clean and everything else. To me, fuel cells made way more sense than electric cars and batteries. I mean, you look at the lithium mining, you look at the life, the batteries and what happens in the cars. They get hot. So people don't realize a lot of these electric vehicles, they have a liquid cooling system for the battery.
Yeah,
there's
still a ton of coolant in there.
I mean, you're cooling just the battery and stuff. So there's a lot going on there. I think the fuel cell makes sense. Hydrogen makes sense. It's clean. I had a guy pose at a Nassau museum up in Cleveland one time. He saw a bunch of us come in and he said, "Hey, you follow me." He's wanting to talk to somebody. He's retired doing his exhibit and says, "Yeah, okay." He says, "Got a question for you." He says, "How much water do they take on the space shuttle when they go up?" Well, I don't know. I mean, you got 3 or 4 astronauts, He says, "None. 0. they capture it all from the burning of the hydrogen.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
Because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the byproduct of,
Yeah.
of the hydrogen combustion is the water, the moisture. So when you look at that, I mean, you want to talk about green technology, and yeah, I know there's going to be some manufacturing and infrastructure and everything that makes it not quite green, but
It's all it's the same thing with electric.
but
stuff.
yeah, I mean, kind of, I think it has a lot of potential. And honestly, the car company's been working on it for years. I know back in '06, there was a GM conference out in California, and
Wasn't
they
there a
had
Hyundai that came out recently
Well,
that had a hydrogen
Hyundai's
system?
done it. And like I said, GM had a whole fleet of car. We drove a whole fleet of SUVs that were hydrogen powered.
That's right. Yeah.
They had some challenges at the time, was thermal shocking of the storage, fuel storage cells. So they were having some challenges dealing with that. But the technology's been around. In fact, GM built the first hydrogen vehicle in 1966. It was a van. So it's been around a long time.
Crazy.
So yeah, I think to me that has more potential than the chart, kind of the course we're on with the batteries. So again, that's another thing we look at as a company. Okay, well, if it goes that way, what do we do? But I think it's going to be interesting. And like I said, in the performance world, the cool thing is we'll find a way to race whatever. I mean, we can take that projector down right now, and if we got a pile of projectors, somebody's going to find a way to race one. You just know it's
We're
going to happen.
racing drones now.
Racing drones. And what's funny, one of the things I like to share with folks is years ago we were doing some things at the college and trying to figure out how can we interact with more of the high school kids. Limited amount of time. We had a 5-person staff, and we're like, hey, maybe we do more stuff in-house and bring them to us, field trips. And so we started thinking about, hey, what have you seen that you can have fun with them? And somebody said, valve cover racing. It's like, hey, yeah, I've seen that at some, at car shows and stuff, take a valve cover. So we're like, well, what would the track be? I said, so I'm like, well, there's got to be something on the internet. Everything's on the internet.
Yeah.
So I go on the internet and I start to, mind you, this has been like 10 or 15 years ago. There's a whole association on valve cover racing. There's rules and how to
there's
build a
not.
20 gallon. Oh yeah, I'm telling you, if somebody in America is going to take it off the deep end in racing. So I think that's what we kind of have to keep a focus on. We look at stuff and go, yeah, what would you ever do with that? Or how would you ever race? Or what would you make? You got to really think out there. Somebody's going to race it, compete with it.
Some nut job in their garage
Yeah.
is going to make something happen.
So what can I make for it?
Oh my god. Oh, that's so awesome. All right. Well, I guess just so the viewers understand a little bit, can you give like a quick description of how a hydrogen car works?
Well, basically, I can give you a rough description. It's been a while, but basically you're taking the hydrogen, and typically you got to store the hydrogen. That's one of the challenges. If we store it at ambient temperature, it doesn't have as much heating value because it's one of the lightest element in the universe. So keeping it in a liquid form, but the problem there is it's like minus 340 degrees. So yeah, that's one of the challenges in the infrastructure side of it. People pumping it. If you put it in liquid, if we put it in as a gas form, we got to compress it. So then that's pressure issues. But essentially, as far as the engine, it's a fuel cell. So it's going to take and burn the hydrogen, and that generates electricity. So the vehicle's still like an electric vehicle. It's kind of a hybrid, if you will.
Right.
But we're using the hydrogen for the fuel instead of using petrochemicals. So we're using the hydrogen to generate electricity to then drive the vehicle.
Okay. So then how because you'll scroll on TikTok or one of these social media platforms, and you'll see some dude blabbing about how he converted his car to a hydrogen car. And like half the time I watch these videos and I'm like, this is just some dude with a bunch of water bottles and hoses in his trunk. Like this isn't actually doing anything.
Yeah, you could feed the engine hydrogen and it will burn it. Again, the BTU value of hydrogen in a gaseous form is so small that you would have to put a tanker load in to get down the street 3 blocks. So, it was funny. There was a guy out of Miami, if I remember right, that had a van. He was on a local radio station, and I'm getting X amount of miles per gallon and all this with this hydrogen conversion kit. It went nationwide, and next thing you know, the colleges, the news stations are calling the college, so the college always points to me, and here I am on TV, all the local networks, trying to, not debunk it, but try to explain that, maybe everything you're hearing or what he's saying isn't accurate, and we just tried to walk through the physics of it, whatever. So, yes, it burns. One of the biggest misconceptions I think that's hurt hydrogen was kind of like ethanol. We talked about in the 70s, the bad experience. This was interesting, I found, in researching hydrogen here not all that long ago. Everybody points to, the Hindenburg, that blew up, the blimp, and all these people died, whatever. That actually is a myth. What happened, it did burn, but it wasn't the hydrogen that exploded. This is what I think is so cool about this. The figuring out what happened was one scientist looked at it and he said, well, look at the pictures of it. If the hydrogen was burning, and that's what caused the fire, and it's burning, the hydrogen would be gone. And the blimp would be listing downward because it's losing its lift.
Yeah.
In the pictures, it's staying perfectly level. What it turns out, what he found was, as he researched, when they made the covering, it was cloth. Well, that was permeable, so they had to coat it with something to keep it, to hold the hydrogen gas in.
Yeah.
It was aluminized powder, basically the composition of gunpowder. So what happened was the rope hanging down, when it touched the ground, the spark lit the gunpowder, and it was the covering burning, not the hydrogen inside obviously got consumed.
Yeah.
But he said that's why it was still maintaining trim, but half of it was gone.
That's crazy. I've never heard that.
Yeah, and it was like, and they've since, according to the article I found, says they've since corrected history to reflect that, which obviously the hydrogen industry, I'm sure, is promoting that heavily. But it was interesting how simple the solution really was if you just looked at the picture. And I'm looking and go, well, that makes total sense, but nobody ever thought of that.
Yeah, you can tell which one I got taught in school.
Yeah, me
Jeez,
too.
I'm glad they fixed it at least.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh my God. All right. Well, I guess, do you have any, not necessarily closing words, but I guess wrapping up comments about oils or fuels or scent additives or anything that we didn't necessarily discuss that you feel might be important for the viewers to know?
No, I think the biggest thing is just ask questions and do your research. Talk to as many people as you can. A lot of information out there. Try to get it from a qualified source. There's a lot of forums and stuff on there, and people trying to help, but again, there's a lot of people trying to help that don't have the knowledge base or the background and misleading. So I usually tell folks, get with the companies that make the products. Whether it's ours, that's one of the things we pride ourselves in doing is working with the racer or the other companies, but or our parts companies like our sponsor, for the show and everything. Those people are willing to help. Reach out to the experts and do your homework as much as you can, and it will greatly improve your racing program, which makes all of us successful. Like I said, the last thing we want is a guy out, puts a Renegade in a car that won't run anyway, and then thinks it's a fuel issue and whatever. And we don't want him to have that experience, and it certainly isn't good. You put a big Renegade decal on it, and the car doesn't run. It's like, no, let's help you get your car running, then we'll send you the decals. So,
absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, I think that that's the one thing I just like to share is reach out, folks. I mean, there's a lot of folks out there and a lot of companies that are willing to help you. And I've always felt like if a company really isn't willing to help you, well, that kind of tells you something that as you make your choices, maybe.
Oh yeah, I always preach about that. It's just like, ask questions, don't just jump to conclusions and go write shitty reviews and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. I mean, even my auto shop class that I took in high school, the first day I stepped foot in that class, the first thing I learned, he had the word assume written on the whiteboard, and that was it. It was just assume. And he was like a hard-ass kind of dude. But that whole class, the first day, basically all we learned about was the word assume. When you assume something, you make an ass out of you and me. Yep. So if you break down assume, ass, you, me. That's how it's spelled. Yeah. That stuck with my head more than anything. Yeah,
and it's been proven time and time and time again. And we see that. We've had folks, in fact, we were just laughing. We just did a test. There was a company that we do a product for, and they had a customer that says, oh, this stuff won't even run. It won't even start my lawnmower and whatever. So we took a brand new engine and poured it in, and it runs fine or whatever. So
pour it on the ground, light it on fire. Did it light? All right, it works. There's
issues, clearly the person had a challenge, but let us help you figure out what the challenge is instead of just blaming somebody for it. So,
well, that's good. I'm glad y'all take the time to really cater to them.
Yeah.
And answer those questions. So, all right. Well, I want to kind of do the same 3 questions we always do with every podcast. I know this is going to be a little different because you never drifted at all. or you said you've never even been to a real drift event, right?
Yeah, I've seen some exhibition drifting like at SEMA and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and watched some of it, on TV. But I'm not the same as being there. I know. Yeah.
All right. Well, this will be cool for you guys. That way you get because I know a lot of the newer viewers that are watching, you don't even know what you should be getting and stuff like that for your car. But if I just handed you a credit card right now and said, go and buy whatever parts you need off of Injuku to build a good drift car to get into drifting, what car would you choose personally? And what parts do you think a drift car should have to start off with?
Okay. Well, that's a great question. I've always been partial to the Z cars, so the Nissan's definitely, which is good because Injuku's got tons of parts for the Z cars.
Absolutely.
But I'm kind of torn because I could rock it with the Supra and the old 2JZ. I mean, it's hard to go wrong there. So
You can always put a JZ in anything.
that's true. You could retrofit, but I kind of
At
like.
least we got them here.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more of a purist. I kind of like let's stay with the platform if we can. But yeah, I think first thing, we got to have decent brakes on anything. So we're going to need the Rofco brake kits or something along that line. Got to have some good wheels, and I know they carry the Yankee wheels and everything. So we got to get some
Big
good wheels on
Kansei
it.
guy here.
All right, okay, yeah.
Kansei Wheels.
Kanseis, yeah, those are great wheels too. So we got to have some good wheels. But we got to get some suspension upgrades. We got to get that suspension upgraded. We got to get the stiffness in there. We've got to make it do what we need it to do. And then I think once.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do you think the front or the rear of a drift car needs to be softer?
That's a great question. You're pushing me out of my league there a little bit, not having drifted. So
Well, you brought up stiffening up the coilovers, the suspension
Yeah,
and stuff.
you
so
know,
I'm curious if you did know
I'm
to
thinking-
distinguish.
I'm going to go with the front's got to be softer than the rear, but I'm probably backwards on that.
Yep,
Yeah,
backwards.
Yeah, because
You want to be able to squat and get as much grip as possible.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily squat. Some cars don't squat. Like
Right.
a Mustang, if it'll raise whenever you're on throttle and stuff. It's really weird. But yeah, you always want softer in the rear, really stiff in the front.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah,
I was
no,
just
that's
curious
great,
if
yeah.
you knew the answer.
Hey, I love it. You got a drag racer talking drifting, man. How could that
Absolutely.
go wrong?
Yeah. I'd look like a moron if I was trying to talk about drag racing. So.
But then obviously we got to put some power to it too. We got to make sure we got power. We got good clutch and stuff in there. So those would be would be my choice of upgrades: getting the drivetrain right, getting the suspension right, and
Yeah.
the tires and wheels package that's going to work. So
Oh, yeah. And I want to, for you guys watching, put in the comments what you think he should swap out as far as parts go. If you think there's anything he chose but you think should be different, put that in the comments.
I like
I'm curious. So, all right. Well, that's a good one. Wait, so Z was the final chassis you chose?
yeah, probably going to go with the Z car.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Well, that's a good chassis to choose because that's the most common now. So, I don't. Obviously, I have one, but I do kind of think they're a little ugly. They look like a dude. Some people say it in the comments. I see you guys that you can't unsee it now, but it literally looks like a computer mouse. Every Z looks like a computer mouse to me.
Yeah, when you get into the 350, 370s, do look a
Yeah.
little. They look a little Volkswagen mousy. Yeah, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. So
I'm sorry, I say that all the time.
yeah,
I'll
but
stop
you got to remember, I'm
eventually.
older, so the 240Z, it's long and lean. And
Yeah. All right. Well, this question I switched up a little bit. Usually, it's your best advice for anyone getting into drifting. Obviously, it'd be a little different in your circumstance. So, what is your best advice when it comes to race lubricants and fuels and stuff like that? Is there anything that you could pinpoint to be just the best piece of advice to stick and run with?
Yeah, I think do your research. Talk to the people that are doing it, and to your question about getting into drifting or whatever, I think it's the same thing. Every time we've gotten into something, whether it was junior dragsters years ago or we moved into the NHR into throttle stop racing. I mean, the first thing I did is I went to an event and go talk to the people that are doing it, and not just one or two. Talk to a lot of folks and kind of see what's working, what doesn't work, what's kind of the popular opinion. Because, racing's kind of a follow the leader type of thing. If one guy's doing it, and he's winning, somebody else is going to go, I got to have that, I got to have that, I got to have that.
Yeah.
But it's not all wrong either. I mean, if the majority's doing
I'd say
this,
it's even more so that way in drifting.
Is it?
Because
Yeah.
you'll see it all the time. You kind of just go with what you know. So like if you're not into drifting currently, and then one of your buddies gets into it, and then your other buddy gets into it, and like they all have a Z, for instance, you're more than likely going to end up with a Z. So like you just kind of go with what's you're surrounded by, and if it works, it works. There's no need to know anything else.
Be there where the majority is. The majority, if that's what they're doing, that's going to be a great place to start. Then you can start to individualize, I think, a little bit.
Right.
But saying it's the same thing, like I said, with our products or whatever. Go out there, see what the winners are using, and look at all aspects of it. Not only the product, but the support. What are the racers saying? Can I get the answers I need? Will they answer the questions that I need to know? Give you the information you need to know. When you make your decision. So, like I said, just do your research.
Perfect. Do your research, ask questions.
Yep.
And don't assume.
And don't assume.
Don't make an ass out of you and me. All right. And then this is a little heavier, but if you had the opportunity to speak to the entire world, what would your one message be? Just about anything in general.
Wow, that's a tough one. I think just approach everything with eyes wide open, and you kind of back to the research. Ask a lot of questions, get a lot of information before you decide to go jump off one way or the other on whether it's doing something or opinion about something or whatever. Just kind of approach things with eyes wide open and realize that your opinion may not be that of everybody else's. And sometimes you find out it's like what I thought I knew. Wow, I really didn't know that at all once I started looking around and asking a lot of questions. So I think that would be the thing, is just talk to a lot of folks, learn as much as you can, and try to see things in the bigger picture, and you'll learn a lot in the process.
Well, that's perfect. I really appreciate it, especially opening your doors and letting me come stomp in and rearrange the room for a little bit. No, this is a great episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, no, it was great to be here. Glad you guys had us on here, and a chance to talk to some racers that we don't always interface with as much as we should be, and hopefully will be down in the future as we continue to grow as well.
Absolutely. And if there's any question that I missed on the oil or fuel stuff, drop them in the comments, and I'll try and get them answered for you guys somehow. But if you want, do you want to plug yourself or anyone out there, anyone you work with, anything like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, just the whole team. I think our whole Renegade team is, we got a great bunch of folks in there. Everybody's dedicated to motorsports. And not all of our team are into motorsports, but they're dedicated to getting people the help they need or whatever. And any questions you have, we got the website out there, renegaderacefuel.com. Tech line, you can reach us anytime. We kind of make a commitment. We'll return a call or get back to you within a 24-hour period of time. And, I tell folks all the time, I travel a lot, I do seminars all over the country, and I says, if I haven't gotten back to you in 24 hours, something went wrong with the message, whatever, coming back and says, hey, look, dude, I need a call, because I'm going to call you. But I did get a kick out of one of the times we were out in Kansas City, and a guy, we were had a big audience and had been to my seminars before, and this dude, after I said that, he raised it, he goes, and I want to say something. I said, okay. He said, I just want to tell you, if you tell him you need a call back anytime, he will call you anytime. He called me at 11:30 one night. I said, well, dude, you said anytime, and I was available. I called you back at 11:30.
I wasn't lying.
so we try to provide that level of service.
Awesome. Well, I love it. I really appreciate it again. And, of course, look below the video. Make sure that subscribe button isn't still red. If it is, you should go ahead and click it, especially if you're still watching right now. And grab the merch, too. Grab our Grassroots Hero shirt. I actually have another product coming soon, finally, that will be not along the T-shirt side, but keep an eye out for that when it comes out. And yeah, thanks, dude. This is awesome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Of course, links to everything are always in the description, but that is all I got for you this week. We'll see you each and every Sunday for a brand new episode. Thanks.
Staying way up to the ceiling. Trust no bitch, can't catch no feelings. I've been taking long flights from the Bay to Ibiza. Hit home runs, I'm a ball like Jeter. I just want 4, then I leave. I'm a young pop star, call the boy.